Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Jane. Okay, good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Communities Committee. As you can see, we have a broad range of subject matters to deal with today, ranging from initiatives that will aim to stimulate our local economy, protect our most vulnerable people, and measures to give people the opportunity to influence how we spend council resources. The common theme of this business is that it all contributes directly to the council priorities recently outlined in the council plan. Okay, I'll move on then to Sederunt apologies. Rona,
Yep, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Carruthers, Marshall and Roney.
Thanks very much. Do you have any declarations of interest? Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Item 4, page 26.6, and thereon it makes reference to Big Burn Supper. I was a co-founder with Graham Main. Even though I'm not on it, I think the perception might be otherwise, so I'll step out on that one.
Thanks very much. Anyone else? In that case, thanks. We'll move on to the meeting, the minute of the meeting of the 5th September. It's a note in the minute. It's already been approved at full council. We're happy to note. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 4, the major festival and event strategy. This report presents members with a refreshed major festival and event strategy for their agreement. The strategy is all about sustaining major events that have international significance and attract new visitors to the region. At its best, this work is about partnership working with event organisers and national funding bodies to maximise the economic impact on our region. Harry Thompson's here to take any questions with Ian Barr there to support him. So I think, have you anything to add to the report?
Chair, just one thing to add, which was brought out during the consultation period, and there's a request to consider the banning of Chinese lanterns and helium balloons from events, which hasn't featured in the report, but I would recommend to members that we can include a standard clause within any funding agreement to the effect that the release of helium balloons and Chinese lanterns would not be permitted at any events funded through the Major Events Fund. The reason being the damage that can be inflicted on livestock and agricultural land by them.
Okay, thanks. Can you open this up to questions? Adam?
Thanks, Chair. As events champion, I'm delighted to see this report come to committee. It really is a good news story for our council, the fact that a couple of years ago we got together with partners right across the tourism industry to develop a strategy. That strategy has worked. It's actually worked, and exceeded expectations. And this strategy very much wants to develop that work, particularly around the major and large festivals that are bringing so much money into our local economy, and also develop smaller ones. So I just want to thank the work of officers who have done a fantastic job over the last event strategy, and I'm sure that will continue over this event strategy, and look forward to us agreeing that and seeing what additional economic benefits we can bring to Dumfries and Galloway through this new event strategy.
Thank you. John Young and then Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I was fortunate enough to be present in Castle Douglas when the Tour of Britain cycle finished there, and apart from a wee crash at the bottom of King Street, it was a wonderful day, very well attended. I mean, there were thousands of visitors, albeit a lot of them were day visitors in the town, but I wonder if you could give me any indication of the reach, and I think it was televised on ITV, was it? Have you any idea of the reach of these events nationally? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the Council works closely with the Tour of Britain and Event Scotland to ensure that major events like the Tour of Britain have the best coverage possible. The Tour is now very well established, and as such has been able to develop positive relationships with media companies. The race was televised live on ITV4 and attracted 250,000 live visitors. Later the same evening, it attracted 320,000 visitors for the viewers for the hour-long highlights programme. That was the second highest viewing figures of the week for the Tour of Britain. The race was also syndicated. The television package was syndicated to 110 countries across the globe.
Ian, did you say 100 or 100 or 10?
110, Chair.
Thanks very much. Jane?
Chairman, I want to ask a question about the value to us of the Scottish Rally. If we look at page 34 of 180, it's perhaps the event that I think probably maybe ticks the fewest boxes, and I just want to know whether it really is something that we should continue to put support into. We've done it for a very long time, and I wonder whether it's time to offer that particular level of support to another organisation. It's a question. And the other issue is about page 29, which is about the change in methodology for calculating the economic impacts. I would think that it was probably quite sensible to continue fully to discount the economic value of local people, because I think that makes it absolutely clear to us when it's external people. So it's just a couple of questions and a couple of points. I would have thought we should probably stick with the original so that we know kind of the worst case, if you see what I mean. So if I could have some assistance on those two.
Harry, you want to take that, or Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I'll leave Ian to deal with the technical issue that was raised secondly there. In terms of the Scottish Rally, it's a long-standing event within the region and does generate a significant number of volunteer hours associated with the event, as well as a large number of bed nights from competitors and the support teams that come in for the rally. The signature events are recommended for this this phase of the event strategy, and we'll certainly keep each of them under review as the strategy progresses over the next 4 years. But we're recommending that Scottish Rally remains in as the becomes one of the signature events for this phase.
Happy, Jane?
Yes, I think we should keep it under review because it's, just looking at it, it's one of the more wobbly ones, and we have supported it for a very long time. It might be time with slender resources to say that one maybe you should think about supporting yourselves.
Thank you. Before I let Rob in, I should actually have said this is getting recorded, just so our members are aware, and be available for the public to listen to later. Before we go on to maybe some more contentious things. Yeah. Ian, yeah.
The second question the councillor asked was around how we measure the economic impacts, and in the strategy that's drawing to a conclusion, the economic impacts reported to members were all net and additional to this region, because we only counted in the visitor expenditure, or the best estimation of visitor expenditure of visitors to Dumfries and Galloway, and we added to that the expenditure events created themselves on their event. And the issue is, should we calculate an element of local people spending when they go to a festival or event within Dumfries and Galloway? When the signature events meets, if members adopt the strategy, we'll seek to create a working group with some of those signature events to look at this issue, so that we create a standard form of economic calculation, so that our reporting is always consistent and only concerned with what creates net benefits to the regional economy.
Sorry about that. You okay with that, Jane? Yes?
Thank you, Chairman. I think what it's slightly wobbly because it's not necessarily clearly absolutely extra expenditure at the margin. I mean, there will always have been a cost of somebody staying in their own home, if you see what I mean. So it's not absolutely clear cut that it's somebody coming from out with. They are external visitors. The other thing that you mentioned about something contentious, Chairman, the joy of this table on page 34 is that you can actually see which are ticking the boxes and hitting the targets. And so what I have said is substantiated with evidence. So that's helpful and very useful to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. I think, like Adam, I welcome this. I think it's a good piece of work, and I like the shape and structure which it's giving to the way in which we are going to take forward major events. I particularly welcome the Regional Events Growth Fund because just as it's important that we have well-established events, it's also important we look at what might be coming through in the future. I think this is still an area in which there is room for growth. I know that the outlook is, as is referred to in the paper, is quite unpredictable, to put it mildly. But I still am of the view that I think this is an area of activity where there is definitely scope for growth. So I think the Events Growth Fund is an important component. What I wanted to ask about it was, seeing here, I think 6.21, that identified festivals events will be considered for funding as recommended by the Events Partnership and approved by the Council. Can I just check that would effectively be this committee that those recommendations would come to?
Chair, yes, that's been the way that up to now as well, that the funding has been approved. It's scrutinised by the Events Partnership at the meeting. They put together recommendations and that then comes to the Communities Committee. Previously the P&R Committee, but in the last year or so it's been the Communities Committee that has looked at it.
John Young?
Thank you, Chair. One of the definitions on page 16 is that the event that operates in a net budget must exceed £30,000. I'm wondering if this figure, the inclusion of this figure, may exclude some major community events. The one that comes to my mind, because I live in the town, is Kirkcudbright Summer Festivities, which I would say meets all the other criteria, but because of that figure, it's excluded from being classed as a major event. And I wonder if including the £30,000 figure might exclude main community events from being regarded as a major event.
You'd be correct, I think, in saying so, and there is a distinction between community events and the major events, and what the major events funding is looking to do is to fund events which do draw in significant numbers of external visitors and bring additional money into the regional economy. And I appreciate, and I'm from Kirkcudbright myself, and to declare an interest, I used to be on the committee at the Kirkcudbright Summer Festivities, and it's certainly been over the last 50 years almost a major boost to the town's economy during the summer months. But in terms of major events, there is that distinction between very locally focused events which draw in visitors from outside, but principally from within the region, and those which are designed to bring in visitors from outside.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Personally, I've let everybody else have their kind of say here. I actually welcome this. It's easy to read. It's clear, and sets out the strategy well, what we're trying to achieve, everything here. And for me, it's an exemplary good practice that the involvement of the other workers and the people, organisations, everything come together. Adam was saying that kind of what he was saying early on here. This is exemplary work we should be actually commending. So I'd just like to thank Harry and Ian and the rest of everyone else who's put their tuppence worth into this report today. So it's well done. Anything else? So in that case, I'll move on to the recommendations. So we're asked to 1, agree to adopt the major festivals and events strategy 2018-21. Agreed. And 2, agree to receive a report at the February 2018 Communities Committee, which will set out the recommended funding for major events projects for 2018-19. Happy to agree? Thank you very much.
Chair, the additional, if committee's happy, then I'll include we'll include within any agreements for major events to be funded through the fund this paragraph relating to the prohibition of release of Chinese lanterns and or helium balloons at events.
I'm happy to agree that personally, but I'm just going to ask the...
I think we're happy that it could be a condition in the particular grant funding.
Okay, so we're happy to agree, everyone, with that thing about the Chinese lanterns. Everyone happy?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Harry. Right, we'll now move on to item 5, developing the Dumfries and Galloway Council Participatory Budgeting Framework, report by Director of Communities. The report presents members with a draft participatory budgeting framework for our agreement. The work complements the Council's priority to be an inclusive council and at the forefront of embracing the principles of community empowerment. Liz Manson and Colin Freeman are here to answer any questions. I think we'll just move straight to questions. Liz, if you're happy. Yep. Any questions? Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome this again. I think probably most of the questions I would have had originally were covered at the seminar, which was very helpful indeed. I do have one particular question I'd like to raise regarding page 54. This is an area of activity which must not be confined to the Communities Directorate. This is something for the entire Council. We're talking about 1% of the Council's revenue budget and potentially other issues as well. I know capital has been highlighted as a possibility, but certainly in the first instance, 1% of the Council's revenue budget. I note that the Directorate contacts are all to be determined. Is it possible for this committee to ask that they are determined as soon as possible? We wish to make progress with this.
Yes, certainly. We're working with the directorates and we will have the names in the document, I'm sure, before it's finalised and published.
Could you give us a timescale, Liz?
Let's say, we'll say by the end of this month.
Well, that's as quick as we're ever going to get, isn't it? Right, okay. So we'll do that through you, Derek, rather than as a recommendation. But it comes to the same thing, yeah?
Yeah, I think thank you, Chairman. I think the point's well made by Councillor Davidson, and certainly we've discussed this at senior leadership team with the Chief Executive and Directors, and we need to ensure we get the right officers who understand the importance of this activity, and therefore all directorates fully buy into it. So the signal from this committee today is appreciated, it's welcomed, and therefore that reaffirms the prioritisation of this work and the identification of the appropriate officers who play a full part in this, not just within the Communities Directorate, but across all four. So happy to progress on that basis.
Thank you. Jane, and then David.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, I think this is actually quite exciting. It builds on what we started to do. I mean, years ago in the area committees where we had some. It wasn't exactly the same as participatory budgeting, because this is obviously something very specific, but it does build on the opportunities that were given to communities to comment on what was going forward in the past. And that slightly leads me on. I have to say, I think at the moment that our community councils are feeling a tad unloved. Whether rightly or wrongly, that's still kind of out there because of, I think, unfortunate events a couple of years ago. And I wonder whether officers would comment on the opportunities that we've got of particularly involving community councils, because they are, after all, elected to represent their communities. And, you know, they certainly do call public meetings, and they do find out what their communities are wanting. So I would like to think that that's something that we can really absolutely recognise as a role specifically that community councils might have in this particular
Just before you come in, could I maybe add a wee rider to that and just say how would we go to support and help do some basic training for people in the communities who might want to participate in the community choices thing? If you could wrap it all in one, would be really helpful.
Chair, thank you. with our recent successful bid to the Government's Community Choices Fund, we made sure there was provision within that so we could go out to community groups and community councils to, one, make them aware of participatory budgeting, and two, to assess their appetite to learn more and become involved more. So there's definitely provision there for us to go out to community groups, community councils. To date, I've actually met with 4 of them, and there has been a real desire to learn more, and I'm more than happy to go out and support them in learning more about PB.
Thanks, Colin. You okay with that, Jane? Yeah. David?
Thank you, Chair. I attended this seminar a couple of days ago about participatory budgeting, and seemed to me it was an attempt to bring more democracy and participation into spending our money. There's a steering group mentioned here, which presumably leads the whole process, and it will include a PBM, representation from the community, place of interest, third sectors, etc. Didn't strike me as being very democratic. I don't think that's a good make-up for that body. I think it should be elected people only, and it seems to fly in the face of the whole purpose of it and could lead to all kinds of accusations of cronyism.
Okay, Liz or Colin?
Thank you, Chair. The steering group, it's essential that the steering group is representative of the community that we're applying the PB process to. So it's essential that we have members of the community on that group, but it's also essential that we have the right people with the right strength and the right abilities to drive and lead the process, to make sure that it's open, honest and transparent, and we avoid the risks that you've just mentioned, Councillor.
Okay, David? Same answer as earlier in the week, yeah. You're a trier, yeah. Anyone else? Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions on page 47, sorry. Page 47. And it's the very bottom line about budgets suitable for PB. Capital budgets linked to regeneration of the potential for larger scale PB activity. That very much touches on an opportunity that a local community group see, where they can explore such a set of circumstances. But there's no timescale set with that. It's just currently, it's something we could consider. Maybe offline I could speak to Liz or somebody to see how we can develop that if such an opportunity exists. And the second question is area committee discretionary budgets. Normally PB, it will be local community groups or wards that will be interested in the activity in their ward. Well, we haven't broken down the Nisdale budget into wards yet. Is that something that's going to happen? Or are we just going to have a bun fight at some stage in a public forum about how much we spend where? That hark back to the good old days when we were fortunate enough to have our own area committee. That unfortunately doesn't exist now. But there is an issue about how we deal with that particular element of it, given that there are wards and currently it's regions or districts that deal with that.
I'm biting my tongue here, Jim. Liz, I'll let you answer it. You're probably more
perhaps I'll pick up some elements of your question, Councillor. With regard to page 47 and the actual budgets, we are working on the basis that what you put in the council plan, about 1% of your budget, that it's for the 18-19 budget that your aspiration is set for. So that's really what we're working to, 1% of your revenue budget. And that's what Colin is certainly working with the directorates to identify appropriate budgets. The examples on page 47 are some of the ones that have come up in the initial discussions. But you're absolutely right that capital budgets is something that we know that communities have an interest in. And indeed that some of the directorates we've asked them to have a look at that. And at the training session on Tuesday, PB Scotland did identify that there were now some examples of where capital budgets had been used successfully for PB projects. So we're in the initial stages and we're certainly working towards that. And just your point about communities expressing an aspiration, again, that was something that came up at your seminar. And in point 1 of page 50, it might be that the communities and residents indeed identify areas that they might be interested in. The actual decision about what will be allocated for PB would still come to a service or an area committee, but the idea or the expression of interest might well come from the community.
Thanks, Chair.
Still name your money for Upper Nisdale. Anyone else? Jane?
Sorry, I do. On the back of that, it's not absolutely clear to me about what the 1% is of, because the vast majority of our budgets are predicated on teacher numbers and social work, statutory requirements, and you can see from this paper already that it's the Communities Directorate that appears to be the chosen one as far as producing the 1%. So what I need to have some idea of is whether the Council is going to be emboldened, possibly, to look elsewhere quite seriously for the rest of the 1%. So, I mean, is it 1% of the whole budget, or is it 1% of what we are left with after we've stripped out statutory requirements?
I think, Jane, without answering for the officers, that was exactly the thrust of Rob's thing at the very start. But I'll let Liz come in if she wants, then Rob, and then David. Yeah.
We're working on the basis that what you had put in the council plan was 1% of the total revenue budget. But, at the end of the day, that's something for you about making the decision when it comes through the budget development process. But that's the basis on which we're operating at the moment.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to confirm, that is absolutely the plan. It may be in the first instance and at face value that some directorates lend themselves more easily to this approach than others, but 1% being decided by communities leaves us in control of the remaining 99%. I do not believe that this is a particularly difficult target to meet, notwithstanding the problems that we obviously have in setting any budget in future years, because this is going to be money that would be spent in communities anyway from each of the respective budgets. We're simply asking them to decide rather than us telling them what we're going to do to them, which was the phrase I think that was used in the seminar. So it's 1% across the piece, and every directorate, hence my question, needs to participate in achieving that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's every directorate, not just the three seen as the main service deliverers. And I think, for me, the other bit here as well is that to build on what Rob said earlier, and Derek's agreed to do, the other directorates need to be including this in their budget setting templates now, right, rather than thinking about it later. So when they're talking to political groups, then that has to be in the back of the minds of all the financial leads and the different groups as we go about trying to set a budget for next year, setting the budget for next year. David, you wanted in? David James?
Yes, thank you. This is quite a lot of money, but it could have been a fantastically exciting exercise in local democracy. However, when I look at the flow chart, you have to get down to about 6 or 7 before we're out of the usual channels and maybe talking to citizens on the street. And then by 9, they get a chance to vote. So because it's such a top-down process, I don't think it really does what it should be doing. And I just wonder whether this flow chart is mandated by the Scottish Government or whether we came up with that flow.
I think if the meeting the other day, I'll let Colin in a second, this is the model that's been used in England for some time, so it's Westminster based. So it's not Scottish Government based, but I'll let Colin come in.
Thank you, Chair. The flowchart on page 50 is very much a model of best practice that's used across the country and across other countries as well as PB has grown. One of the important aspects of a PB process is that we include the public and communities throughout the process at every stage where we can, through the dialogue, through the consultation, through the engagement. And I think what we have to ensure is that is clear within the flowchart or within the procedure and I'm quite happy to go back and make sure that the public are in focus at every stage of the process.
Thanks, Colin. I've another couple of people wanting in. I've got Adam and then Andrew Wood. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. Just in the back of David's question, I wondered if the officers could just touch upon, thinking about how, as a council at the moment, we come to develop policy, and particularly, the reports that come to this committee, and how we're looking at participatory budgeting. I'm just wanting to ensure that, on the back of David's question, that this is a sound method, and that although there are lots of steps, and it might appear that actually, the public don't seem to get that much of a choice, but it's actually to make sure that those decisions that are taken are meaningful and that actually know what we're offering is achievable.
Thank you. Yes, this is just one tool in the box, if you like, about trying to develop empowerment of communities. So it's not going to be for everything, but the concept is around specific issues. And so, yes, communities are very much at the heart of this. And the issue about how we're engaging them, we're at early stages of this. We've not done participatory budgeting before. Our third sector organisations and communities haven't been involved in it before. So we're taking, I think, quite a measured and balanced approach to making sure that we're able to do this in a planned way, and that it develops as time goes on.
Thanks, Liz. I've got Andrew Wood and then Rob.
Thank you, Chair. On page 49, when we were looking at additional information, it says advice and support should be provided for those project holders who are unsuccessful in securing funding. Is there any appeals procedure within this? Because I don't think there is at present. At least when I was looking through it, I didn't see any.
Chair, thank you, Councillor. The model of best practice doesn't have an appeals process within it. However, what it does include in it is the opportunity for community groups to get feedback on developing proposals. So the process is very much a learning process for community groups that want to be involved. The reason that we've included the section about feedback and advice post-process is that we want to make sure that everybody gets something from the process. An application may not meet the criteria set, it may not look to improve the outcomes that have been identified, but the community have taken the time and effort to actually put themselves forward. And I think that's important, and I think that's an opportunity to then build capacity and resilience within the community by supporting that group thereafter.
Thanks. Just before you go on, Andrew, I think the question was about appeal, and who would you appeal to? Because it's the people, the highest court in our region, who'd be deciding whether it's successful or not. So there would be nowhere to appeal to. I think that's the point that was made at the training session the other day, wasn't it? Yeah. So are you back in? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman. It was to go back to Councillor James's point. I think, or I have the view that this is likely to be an iterative process. I think that probably where we start now is not necessarily the way that participatory budgeting will look in 5 years' time. And I suspect that that is probably a good thing. In fact, it is almost certainly going to be a good thing. I reflect with interest on the information we were given at the seminar where, and I can't remember the location, but I think it was somewhere in Latin America where they've been doing this for about 20 years. And they change it every year. But it's not the organisations in charge that change it every year. It's basically the populace that change it every year. I'd also reflect on the fact that, in a sense, we do this already, because if you think about discretionary grant budgets for area committees, we review the criteria for those every year, and we quite often amend and change them as we go along to respond to things that have happened, or things we like, or things we worry about. So there are elements of a process of reviewing and changing how we disperse money that are actually perfectly normal and something that we're actually accustomed to. The difference, of course, is that we won't be the ones doing it, it'll be the people who are doing it instead. But I think that in all likelihood, we will probably get to a clearer, simpler system, which we haven't thought of yet, but actually it's not for us to think of. I think it will properly be for the people who participate in this with us to come up with the improvements that they wish to see. And I think if they do that, that's probably an indication that we're succeeding in this.
very happy perhaps to reflect some of that in the introduction, because there's obviously going to be some final amendments to the document before it's published. And I think that would be a useful thing to put in, that this is in development and over the years will be changed.
Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a question come back from David and Adam's point on this flowchart. At what point do the public actually get really heavily involved with this? Because I'm all for including the public, but when you start to bore them with bureaucracy, and if there's not enough officer support, see that 1%, the 1% of the total budget, is that going to be able to pay for extra officers? Is that going to pay for the extra support that these communities actually need to deliver this?
Chair, the way PB operates is that the money available is for the delivery of projects, and it's the projects that make the impact to the outcomes and the people that are involved.
You happy with that, Andrew? Yeah. Any other questions? I'm getting ready to move to recommendations. Just before I do, are we happy to remit to Derek to raise with the corporate management team about the issue on the other departments, and to be ready in time for the budget setting process for next year, or do you want to embed that in as an extra recommendation? I'm easy either way. I'm happy to remit it, but yeah.
Chair, I think on the basis that Liz had said about the end of this month, being able to do that, as long as that's achieved, I don't see a need to put it in the recommendations.
So you don't see the need to put it? No, there's no need, no. Okay, so we're happy to go and work and do it through Derek with the corporate management team. Happy with that? Yep, agreed. So we're noting the commitment of the council plan to determine 1% of the council's budget by PB as part of the priority being inclusive council. Yep. Consider, amend and agree as appropriate the council's PB framework. That's the appendix. Yep. And 3, note the positive reception to the participatory budget and work already being taken forward in Dumfries and Galloway. That was in paragraphs 316 to 317. Happy with that? Right. David, sorry, you want in? Yeah, what do you want to do, sorry?
On 2.2, I would like to suggest that we review the framework to include real live public at an earlier stage, and I don't know if there's support from that. I think Councillor Wilson's...
We've actually agreed that, but we've moved on from there. We're now in 2.3.
Chairman, with respect, you went through 1, 2 and 3 and you didn't. You looked down all the time. I did signal to the governance officer that David wanted to speak.
Well, we are where we are, Ian. We moved on, and are you want to put this to a vote, like?
Well, I'd hope there'd be a consensus around that. I mean, Councillor Wilson's, I think, gave some support to this view that we need to include, and Councillor Giusti, that we need to have the public in earlier in the process. And it's potentially a great project, an expensive one, but I think we need to get it right. And if it's going to be democratic, we should get people in earlier.
Well, okay, I'll just 2 seconds, and I will reopen it on this one occasion, right? Because for me, the flowchart is exactly right. Because at the end of the day, the public will be voting on when they've got the fullest possible information. Right? That is why they're at the end of the process there. They're also involved in the process of what projects could potentially be done, right? Because they're bringing forward the suggestions. So they're at the start and at the very end. We're certainly not wanting a Dumfries and Galloway Brexit situation where people voted on something they didn't understand. So what they vote here is they're voting on something at the end of this process that they do understand. It's been fully evidenced, and all the information's there. So if you're not happy with the 2.2 as it is, have you got an alternative?
Yes, I don't think we need to insult the public by saying and Brexit, etc. But I would like to suggest that this is put back for a review of the chronology of how it goes through, and with a view to the public being included in the early steps rather than down the list.
Adam?
Thanks. I would just like to say, I think Councillor James has misunderstood my question. I appreciate that this is a very new framework that officers are getting to grip with, and I was very pleased with the answer the officers gave. I don't expect that the first time that we do PB will be right, but I appreciate that officers are ready to evaluate every exercise that we do and do that as timely as possible.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. From my reading of page 50, the first point at which the public are involved is stage 4. How much earlier are we expecting them to be involved?
Ian Blake.
Thank you. Like David, I don't really think this needs to go to a vote. What we're asking for is, with the flow chart, that the public be included in every step. As Colin Freeman said, he was quite prepared to go back and look at that. I think we need that embedded in the recommendation.
Okay, I'm trying to accommodate you here, Ian, but the problem here is we took this from PB UK. That's where it's from. It's already tried, tested, and been shown as exemplary good practice. So are we really going to try and change something here? If we've got, at the very early stage of the process, the public involved, all the way through the process, the public involved, are we really going to hang ourselves out to dry here on a flow chart on a piece of paper? I think that's the vital question we need to ask ourselves here. I'm kind of looking at Colin. I mean, how easy is it? Can we change that flow chart, or is it something that's been provided by someone else?
Chair, I think the flow chart is, as I said earlier on, the model of best practice. I think what could be done is to look at the narrative that underpins the flow chart to make sure, as I said earlier, that the public is in focus at every stage of the procedure, and it's written in there.
So I'm kind of looking across at David and Ian here. So if the narrative was to actually read, to be very clear that the public are involved at every step of the process, would you be happy with that?
Me personally, yes, I would do.
Well, it would be an improvement that probably I could accept in the view.
David, it's a yes or a no. You know, would you be happy with that or no? I think I'm just trying to bring this to some sort of conclusion. Sorry?
Yes.
You'd be happy with that? Yep. So we can deal with that in the narrative. So we're happy to do that. So then 2.2 stands, so it's 2.3. We note the positive reception to the PB work already undertaken in Dumfries and Galloway, as outlined in paragraphs 316 and 317. We're happy to note that. Thank you. Thanks very much. Move on to item 6, which is the Homeless Service Improvement Plan Progress report, again by the Head of Customer Services. This report provides members with an update on the Homeless Service Improvement Plan. At this point, I would wish to introduce the new members introduce members to Paul Scott, our recently appointed Team Leader for Homelessness, Laurie Nichol, Project Officer, and Amy Jordan, the graduate, who are in the back of the room. These new appointments are testimony to the Council's commitment to bring about tangible improvements in our homeless service. I welcome the actions that are now complete as detailed in paragraph 3.2, including reviewing the use of temporary accommodation. I also welcome the improved performance detailed at paragraph 3.3, such as the increased customer satisfaction with temporary accommodation. I also acknowledge we need to continue to sustain this improvement and also address key issues such as the increase in repeat homeless applications. There is little doubt that the best way to tackle homelessness is to stop people losing their homes in the first instance, and that's why we are prioritising our development work in housing options. Paul Scott's here to take any questions on the report. First then, I've got John Campbell, and then I've got Jim Dempster.
Chair, before John comes in with his agreement...
Sorry, excuse me, John Campbell, then Jim Dempster.
No, it's an issue I have. I need to speak first because I've just realised there's a reference to private landlords in here, and I am a registered private landlord, so I need to make a declaration of interest, albeit very belatedly, and I don't intend to leave the room, but I am a registered private landlord with Dumfries and Galloway Council.
Okay, Jim, that's noted, and we'll make sure that's reflected. Are you the same, Graham?
Chair, I'm a private landlord as well, and I take the same view as Councillor Dempster that I won't be leaving the room.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Is there any other private landlords? Andrew, right?
Yeah, he's opened a can of worms here.
That's it.
I'd also register.
Any other private landlords? Okay, we welcome this committee, yeah, absolutely. Okay, are we happy to start with questions then? Now we've got the statements, declarations of interest that should have been in ages ago, but never mind. So, any questions? John Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just looking at page 60, the paragraph 3.15. The improvement plan is mainly on course, which is quite commendable for the council. Are we confident that we can meet the target?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are confident that we can meet the targets that are set out in that particular aspect for the plan. With regard to the LAN, the figures are from the previous reporting period, and we've seen sustained improvement from that reporting period to the last, and we continue to see improvements across the first 6 months of this reporting year. It is something we're not complacent about. We will continue to monitor on a regular basis as part of our overall plan, but yeah, we are confident that we can maintain those levels of improvement.
You happy with that, John? Yep. Anyone else? Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, I would just like to follow your lead, as to say on 3.2, Tim Pogson at the Tackling Poverty Conference on Monday highlighted how year on year over the last couple of years we have improved these figures, and I think that is to be welcomed. I have a slight question on page 63. Looking at the lead officer, I note that on outcome 1.2, it refers to a temporary accommodation project officer. I just wonder if we could get a comment on that, sort of how that will be staffed, just to ensure that there is, you know, a continuation over that 2 year, that is in timescale to start and end, to ensure that we can continue the good work and bring these figures in a more positive direction.
Right. Thank you, Chair. The position that you refer to is already in post as part of the project team, who are working very well and very hard to continue to deliver those improvements. They are temporary in post until next summer, in line with the estimated timescale for that particular plan.
Page 64, recommendation 4, could I suggest, it might already be happening, that you're suggesting that there should be a protocol in place for young people leaving care, and I would simply like to suggest that, as well as speaking to Common Housing Register and Children's Services, this should be run past the Children's Champion Board, the Looked After Children's Champion Board, as representative of the users. So through you, Chairman, if I could possibly ask that is done. I think it would be appropriate to ask the people who have had experience of this particular problem.
Could I just add to that? Well, maybe we'd want to consider tying that in as well, because that's started the transition from care into full adulthood, that we should be speaking to the Integrated Joint Board, who've got responsibility for housing, in terms of it was delegated. So, okay, go ahead.
Yep, thank you, Chair. As part of the Homelessness Forum that we've recently established, all relevant key stakeholders are invited along. They are part of that forum. We also have an ongoing customer engagement plan, which will look specifically into issues such as that. We are keen to have person-centred approaches, and that is key, and engaging with those people and our support workers are key to that.
Thanks. Anyone else? No? Okay, Jim? Yep.
I just wondering, it's recommendation 10, and it talks about refurbishing the service hub, which is great. I presume it'll go without saying that it'll be outreach services, because it's not everybody that could and should make their way to Dumfries to seek advice and support. And the last thing, which has nothing to do with the report itself, which is very comprehensive, the writing's so small it's difficult to read in good light, never mind bad light, and I thought we'd sorted this out. I thought we got a paper that was actually readable without magnifying glasses.
We did raise that actually when we saw the draft papers, and it is slightly bigger here than it was in the draft paper, trust me. So maybe it's something we could report, Derek, could we go back to the print unit when they do these, even if it takes a bit more paper, make it a size where people can read. But your point's made. Derek?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Apologies, members, you're absolutely right, and I have the same problem as well, so I certainly empathise with the situation, so we'll certainly take that on board. What we can do is we can actually arrange to have this published with the print unit and issued to all members, just so you've all got a copy that is readable, because it is clearly an important strategic item.
Thanks, Chair. And about the outreach work, I take it that will take place and that folk will not be summoned to Dumfries.
Yeah. Yeah. Jane, did you want back in?
Well, I was just going to say, I suggest a stronger pair of specs. You know, there are. I can't read it with my contacts in, but with a pair of spectacles on, I can read it easily. I think it's just a stronger pair of specs.
Maybe you can come and read it to me, Jane.
Right, well, I think we'll move on for that. I don't think there's any comeback to that or anything needed. Okay, so I'm going to now move to the recommendations. I think everybody's had their say. Okay, we're asked to note the key service improvements, paragraph 3.2. Note, yeah. And 2, endorse the progress made towards the homeless service improvement activities appendix and the appendix and in paragraphs 3.2 to 3.3. Happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm moving on to item 7, which is the Universal Credit Update. The report provides members with an update on the implementation of full service universal credit by the Department for Work and Pensions, and also provides an indication of the anticipated local impact. Despite the implementations of Scottish flexibilities, I am in little doubt that universal credit will have significant impacts on our customers, as detailed in Appendix 1 of the report. This Council is committed to protecting our most vulnerable people, so it will be vital that our arrangements are as robust as they can be to mitigate real hardship on local people. Paula Doherty is here to take any questions on the report. Is there anything you need to add, Paula? Are you quite happy?
Nothing I need to add, just any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Adam?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not quite sure where to begin on this, because I'm struggling. I'm not sure what frustrates me more. The turnout of Tory members in the House of Commons last night for the Labour Day motion on universal credit, or the turnout of Tory members on this council at the Tackling Poverty Conference on Monday, both rates being nil. I'll be fair to Councillor Gypsy that he gave his apologies for the conference to the chair of this committee. After the vote in the House of Commons last night, I hope that democracy will prevail and that there will be a review on the implementation of universal credit from the UK Government, and hope that this will help Dumfries and Galloway Council, and therefore need some sort of review on that and a further report. I have a few questions on universal credit, but I think it's important to note that I sincerely think that the UK Government is setting up this council to fail, because as we have seen from previous councils that have already went to the full implementation of universal credit, it has had some really devastating impacts on the most vulnerable people in our society. Looking through the papers, I've got a couple of questions. On page 79, we have paid monthly in arrears, risk to customers, no funds to pay for essential living costs for around a month and a half. I won't tell you what I've written on my papers, but how on earth is that possible for someone in the most vulnerable position able to afford that? And what as we as a council can we do to make sure that nobody's in that position where they have no funds to pay for essential living costs for around a month and a half? I hate to think that the worst outcome of that is that it will drive more people to suicide, because for a month and a half not being able to afford basic essentials is absolutely disgusting. Page 80, looking at how we as a council can ensure that no one is left behind. There's a lot of emphasis here on job centres, bearing in mind we only have 3 job centres in Dumfries and Galloway. How are we ensuring that we are not allowing anyone to fall below the net and to ensure that everybody receives the help needed? particularly older vulnerable citizens in Dumfries and Galloway who most probably have less experience and less ability to use technology. How are we ensuring that with only 3 job centres in Dumfries and Galloway, are we ensuring that nobody will fall below the net? And I think that's all looking through my notes, but bringing up what I'd said earlier, I think that there will be changes at a national level on universal credit. I think that we're at risk of seeing too many vulnerable people fall below the net, and I would like to request that this committee receives an update on universal credit at every single meeting until such a time that universal credit is fully implemented in Dumfries and Galloway, and that has had a chance, that the process has a chance to be evaluated, and to ensure that nobody is suffering as a result of the implementation of full universal credit. Thank you.
Before I ask Paul to try and work out what the questions are there, but I can give you the assurance that there will be a regular update to this committee, every committee, until for as long as it's necessary until we get to the bottom, or if the UK government do another U-turn like they did yesterday. Paula, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Because it was kind of more a statement than a question, but there's some questions in there.
I picked up what are we going to do to help people in crisis after they're waiting a month and a half for the payment. The structure of universal credit is expecting that customers will have some money before they make a claim. The expectation is they live like you and I would do, where you get paid monthly, and once you've been paid, that money is used to last until the next month. We fully appreciate that there is a significant number of customers, and I've raised this a number of times with DWP locally, nationally, and part of my work in my local governing body, that the majority of customers that we find in crisis are not paid monthly. They're paid weekly, fortnightly. So they'll have less money to last until the next payment is available. The month and a half wait is strongly debated in Parliament on a number of occasions, but what can we do about that? Well, first off, we will work with our customers who are impacted to ensure that they do not have waiting days unless they have to. There are a number of exceptions to the 7 waiting days before their claim begins. We will work with customers to make sure that if they make a claim, that they are not affected by waiting days unless they have to. The other one is they are available to make an application for a crisis grant payment from the Scottish Welfare Fund, and that is currently in use by a number of customers to sustain them over waiting for their next DWP payment, and that will continue. We are expecting an increase, and certainly talking from other local authorities who have implemented universal credit, an increase in crisis grant applications to support customers for those weeks before their first payment. But we are hoping that we'll be able to tailor that support to ensure that when they get their first payment, that they are not then in the same situation for the next month. So that covers the month and a half for support for our most vulnerable. The claims made and maintained online, we're working with our local Job Centre Plus to raise our issue of our rurality, and watching closely, and I'm in close and regular contact with Highland Council, who are obviously much more vulnerable than we are in full service, to make sure that customers who are unable to access the internet, which is the default position for maintaining and making a universal credit claim, have all the support that they can get to ensure their claim is up and running. Local Job Centre Plus say they have a visiting team which will go out and visit the most vulnerable to help them make their claim. We also have a network of customer service centres with free public access PCs for customers to go in to make use of those facilities. We are working with partners in SIPL to ensure that there are training courses available for customers who need to up their digital skills. In reality, if a customer is unable, then we will be able to help them somehow.
Thanks. I've got Rob, Jane, Jim D, and Tracy, in that order. So Rob first, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start by giving the Conservative government some credit. They appear to have stopped the premium rate number, the £55 a minute, or up to £55 a minute number, that claimants we're going to have to call, or we're already having to call, that is some modest progress, and I think is welcome as far as it goes. I was interested in what Paula said about the expectation that claimants would have some money. There's a simply ferocious proportion of the population, the working age population, that is never more than a couple of weeks away from financial disaster, whether they're being paid weekly or monthly. Right now, there is a eye-watering level of unsecured personal debt in this country. The notion that claimants for universal credit will be able to sustain themselves for 4 or 6 weeks while they wait for state assistance is nonsense. It's demonstrably not happening, and I have no reason to believe that this low-wage region is going to be any more resilient than the local authority areas where universal credit full service is already in existence. And the paragraphs in the report demonstrate or outline what some of those impacts are likely to be. I welcome the commitment to regular reporting to this committee. We don't have a welfare reform subcommittee now, so we need to have an eye on this. I think we need to be mindful as well that there will be impacts and implications that fall out with the direct remit of this committee. I think it was at the Tackling Poverty conference we were told that food banks in East Lothian saw a 40% increase in demand on the rollout of full service universal credit. That stands to reason. If you haven't got any money for 6 weeks, how do you eat? If you don't eat, that's just about long enough to starve to death. So it stands to reason that the level of demand for services which are not part of the council but are nevertheless partners with us may also increase as well. Again, something I think we need to have an eye on. Finally, Chairman, I think we need to have a view on this, and I think we need to be saying something about it. It's good that we have a report here. It's good that we are keeping an eye on this matter. It's good that we put the resources of this council, so far as we can allocate them, towards addressing the pressures and the problems that are likely to arise out of this. But I think that we need to be saying something publicly about this. I think we need to be lobbying about this. Otherwise, what Councillor Wilson says is absolutely right. We will simply absorb pressures and do our best to help when actually we should be saying something at the same time. I note that we've participated in the statements that have been made to Scottish Government, to Westminster, in partnership with COSLA. I think that we should be reinforcing that ourselves as a committee. I'll leave it to your judgment, the best way of going about that. But I think that that is something we should be doing in addition to the practical preparations that we can take. If something is wrong, we should get up on our hind legs and say so.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I don't think there's any questions in there, really, Paula. Jane? Sorry? No question, no. Jane, and then Jim, and then Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman, and I thank Paula Doherty for the explanation that she gave us. My question, I suppose, really is that it's not that it's an infinite number of people. We've got a client base, a customer base. We actually know the vast majority of them already, and I would imagine that our staff have a pretty shrewd idea of who is and who is not going to cope. And I'm just wondering at this point how proactive we are being with these particular people and families who are going to require assistance. After the poverty conference, I went away and I looked up the Roundtree Foundation's literature on the whole process, and what interested me was the level actually of acceptance of the need to change things and to put in some level of benefit caps. But at the same stage, we must, as a council, we must be absolutely proactive to stop this sort of thing happening. We know already that 25% of universal credit claimants wait for 6 weeks, which, I mean, I would have thought probably would be really quite unacceptable if we can possibly head that off. Because we know that now from having seen other people come. So my question to Paul is, what are we doing, on an individual basis to try and stop it?
Can I add a wee bit to your question, if you don't mind? Can you give us an idea, Paula, of the difference in the areas we've had partial implementation and the ones who are into full implementation, and just exactly how that jumped, because I know through your national working, you know some stuff like that. So if you could maybe enlighten the committee, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Chair and Jane. The structure of universal credit means that it's calculated monthly. So the 6 weeks, it's always 6 weeks, it's actually 5.43 if you want to be pedantic about it. Customers will wait 7 days, then 1 full calendar month, then 7 days for their payment. Their entitlement won't be calculated until the end of the calendar month. So if they have 7 waiting days, they will wait 38 days before their entitlement of universal credit for that past period is calculated. That's the structure of the benefit. So the best that we can do to release payments is to make sure that they do actually receive that payment the 7 days after the end of the month by structure. What we can do is we can ensure that we work with our partners to prepare customers who are likely to be impacted. Last month, this committee gave funding to social work services to work with a number of troubled families. We expect that they will at some point move on to universal credit, and that funding is for them to ensure that these families have the right level of support for moving on to universal credit. The numbers, moving the numbers, the people that will move on to universal credit the fastest, because it's new claims, only new claims to legacy benefits, are the ones who are most economically active. So if you think of a family who are, say, have been on long-term income support due to caring responsibilities, have a number of children in the household, it is quite unlikely they will move on to universal credit in the early years because nothing changes. You know, it's only when something changes that they will move on to universal credit. That gives us a little bit of time to support those who are most vulnerable, and families being that group in particular. From the numbers, we have been in, I get the terminology mixed up, we have been in low-scale universal credit rollout now for 2 years and have around about 300 families or individuals, they're not really families, individuals on universal credit on the basis of my caseload of around 12,000 housing benefit claims. Around about 55 to 60% of my housing benefit claims are working age. Universal credit doesn't affect pensioners, won't affect pensioners. Speaking to East Lothian and Inverclyde, East Lothian had a percentage shift onto universal credit within the first 9 months that they have been working. Calculating it back for ourselves, if our pattern was to be the same, we're not the same geographical area, we don't have the same areas of multiple deprivation. We're not exactly the same, but if we were the same as East Lothian, we would see 1,500 housing benefit customers just now being on universal credit at the end of 9 months. That's 1,500 families that will be on universal credit. Let's not forget that universal credit has its flaws, and it has many of those. It also is significantly better off for those people who are in work. So customers who are in work and earning will be better off financially on universal credit. Not talking about the monthly payment or any of the other issues that are there, they will be financially better off on universal credit. And these customers are the ones who are likely to shift as quickly. I think that was everything I missed in.
Thanks for that honest answer. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. On this Appendix 1 on page 79, I think it's a very sobering report. In fact, it's a really challenging report for us all. 7 waiting days, the risk to the council, increased demand for crisis payments, inability to collect rent. Right through the paper, that's what this says. This is the potential outcome for us. There was an eviction last week in Sanquhar, presumably for rent arrears, and there's a major impact on the family, children, and how that community deals with that. And that's a feature of what might happen if we don't deal with this and deal with it properly and support the folk that are in need of support. And I have a couple of questions. If Paula needs additional staff to deal with this, do we have additional staff trained, ready, and do we have the capacity to take the additional contacts that are made. My own council library, and I'm sure it'll not be unique, open 17 hours a week with 3 PCs, and if everyone on claims are required to be making these online, we don't, I would suggest, have the capacity to deal with the likely volume. And how do we increase capacity or access or simply equipment to support communities throughout the region in areas that are suffering from deprivation that don't have the access and the hours that are necessary maybe to assist and support people who need it? Are the food banks keyed up? And that might not be our direct responsibility, but we need to be sure that in the event of a crisis occurring, that access to some basic essentials is available. And I understand that currently a substantial amount of food being distributed from food banks on a daily and weekly basis. And the last thing is, these crisis payments, are they alone? Because if they are, that simply puts a bigger pressure on the recipients. And if no, there's a major problem with how the government of the country has got to resource this.
Okay, I'm hoping I've covered everything when I'm done. The impact for the local authority in collection, how can we support our customers to make sure that they can pay, is actually in my next report. So we can deal with that then. We are looking to make sure that all financial support that is available is ready for those customers who need it. Staffing, never say no to more staff. However, last month you agreed to fund 3 positions within my team to cover welfare and housing options, and these staff are intended to intervene before a customer becomes homeless and hopefully, ultimately, earlier on to prevent them even reaching that point with appropriate financial and physical support to ensure that they are ready to deal with the challenges that they face. We are working towards those staff, hopefully starting before the end of this year, so that they can cut their teeth on housing benefit issues and other issues before full service universal credit starts on the 7th of February. In relation to do we have capacity to deal with volume, I've been working with the customer services centres to ensure, to try and determine what capacity is available currently in computer use and how much of the computer use is actually for maintaining DWP benefits. We are trying very hard to work out how much of the use is for that purpose to determine whether or not there is going to be a need for us to look at free public access is available, but first come, first serve for those who need to do it for this particular purpose. At the moment, there is capacity within customer service centres, and we are working with our partners who provide computer use, free computer access to our customers in a number of other third sector organisations, and also our landlords. DGHP and Lorburn both have computer facilities available in a number of their offices. If customers don't have the ability to maintain their claim online, the DWP have indicated that there will be some easements for that, but we just need to make sure that those customers who come across these challenges contact us to tell us rather than wait for disaster to happen so that we can intervene. We are working with our partners to ensure that we're all ready for the implementation of universal credit and ensuring that the DWP will be having some training sessions, which is the list of the training sessions that are available, will be available to all. Within Dumfries and Galloway, we expect full third sector involvement. At those training sessions, there will be someone from either myself or someone from my team in present so that we can make sure that any questions that are being asked are dealt with in an appropriate fashion and we're ready to together provide a package of support for our customers. Scottish Welfare Fund payments are grants, not loans. They don't have to be paid back. So customers who are in that situation are not going to be asked to repay that money. Just now, I pay out around £5,000 a week to customers in crisis. I'm expecting that will go up. We're trying to do some modelling on what the anticipated demand is, but at this moment in time, it's very much we'll just have to wait and see and make sure that we have the funding available and the commitment available to support those customers come 7th of February. Is that them all? Yep.
Okay, that, Jim. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just a small point for some clarity. On page 75.3.4 says, in addition, councils are incurring additional administrative costs because of added complexities and processes significantly in excess of funding received from DWP. Just what does that actually mean?
It's an excerpt from a COSLA briefing paper in relation to universal credit. Local authorities, particularly those with significant housing, with their own housing stock, are finding that universal credit is much more administratively burdensome than current practice. The DWP provide us with a very small amount of funding for all local authorities to manage the implementations of universal credit, but what we are finding is it's insufficient. It's not enough. We go back to the DWP and indicate that it's not enough, and the point of the COSLA briefing and the COSLA letter to the DWP was to highlight that issue, that the funding that is being given by the DWP is insufficient for appropriate supports to be delivered to customers on universal credit, and we continue to lobby on that behalf.
Thanks, Paula. Anyone else? Andrew?
Can we expand on that? And have we got figures to identify exactly what the differentials are? And is there any way of making a case for a further enhancement of what you're presently getting?
I don't have the figures for full service yet. We expect to receive our notification from the DWP about how much they expect to fund us for full service implementation prior to that date. I think for local authorities, it's about how they approach universal credit. Do they try to fit the universal credit square peg into the round hole of service delivery as it is? Or do they amend their services and their delivery of services to fit the universal credit? We continue to lobby the DWP about the insufficient funding that they give us for a number of factors. However, they're a very big machine who doesn't listen very much. And they have the same fiscal responsibility and fiscal reality that we have, that they just don't have the money to give. What level of support do we as a local authority want to give our customers on universal credit? Because if it was the level of support that the DWP mandate we give, it's way less than we are giving. And if we want to do more than they need us to do, they're saying you'll do this and this. If we want to do more than that, we're going to have to pay for it ourselves.
Thanks, Paula. Any other questions? No? Tracy, yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just want to come back in on that. So is there a chance that these extra costs are going to make it difficult to provide assistance to the extent that we need to customers?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to establish. The reality for the local authority is if we don't, we will have costs elsewhere. If we don't help, there will be an increase in homelessness, which we are mandated by the Scottish Government to act upon. The costs to support homelessness are exorbitant. I'm sure you're all aware. So if we don't help with universal credit, there will be costs further down the line, and they'll be much bigger, which is part of the funding that was agreed at last committee in relation to the Welfare and Housing Options Officers. It's a 2-year funding deal, but the hope is in those 2 years, we will be looking at what it would have cost us had we not done, to see if we can at all extrapolate at what our needs are. It's a very difficult area, and the ramifications of a welfare benefit change for round about 1 in 5 of our households within this area are currently receiving some sort of welfare benefits. If you go down to 1 in 10 are working age and will ultimately be in universal credit. That's only the families that we are dealing with just now, but remember that there are a number of families out there who are receiving tax credits, who will receive universal credit, who have been nowhere near housing benefit. They are our unknowns. So probably the answer to your question is we don't know.
I think if I can just kind of paraphrase that, I mean, basically we know how many taxis we're going to sow, but we don't know how many we're going to lift, right? Because it's got to come at the end of the day. So it was something that was asked earlier about regular reports and updates. So I mean, updates from you, Paula, through Derek, for each committee as this rolls out, they're extremely helpful, and all the information you can get from elsewhere to give us a best idea of what's exactly happens. No doubt we'll not be the only ones. Just before we go to the recommendations, at the conference on Monday, I'd asked Derek and the staff to look at how we could help straight away with some things. And Derek, you've got something to
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thanks, members. I think, firstly, just applaud Paul and her team for doing a superb job in what is a very complex area, and certainly we are indebted to the work that they do, because I know they are focused on minimising the adverse impact that is likely to occur. I just want to assure members, officers in this council are clear that you agreed your council plan only a few weeks ago. The key priority was protecting the most vulnerable people, and the Chief Executive acted swiftly in ensuring that all corporate management team recently received a presentation on and briefing on our efforts as a council to minimise the adverse impact of poverty, and particularly the new universal credit benefit. So it's just to assure all members that swift action has been taken. Following the Chairman's intervention on Monday, we've also suggested that, as Paula alluded to, that we will make sure our 24 customer service access points across the region are geared up with staff training that's in the action plan before you, but also that the computers and telephones will be made available and clearly prioritised for those customers facing this situation. So again, we will happily update you on that position in next month's report. And Paula also made mention to the Welfare and Housing Options team that, again, through your direction, we are in the process of putting in place, which is certainly welcome. So I think what's come out from the conversation, certainly this morning, members, is an impression that it's been quite a sobering discussion. It might be helpful, therefore, as a priority, if you are open to the suggestion, Chairman, that you might want to arrange a members' briefing to just bring you up to speed before the next committee for all members of the Council, just to make this more of a workshop, so we can actually present with, in more detail, some of the facts, some of the case studies, and I'm at your view on that. And secondly, there was a suggestion that you may wish, as well as receiving ongoing reports as a standing item, that the Chair and Vice Chair may be remitted to continue to present the Council's position on this through appropriate lobbying and campaigning with relevant bodies. So at your disposal, Chairman, for how you wish to proceed.
Thanks, Derek. I think that'd be really helpful. And I'm just actually wondering if I take the example of Glen Kens, which I usually use, or my ward in North West Dumfries, the issues are different. And I'm wondering if the easiest, simplest way for update for members is through the ward forums, fora, right, that we're going to set up with the ward workers and Paula's dedicated team for that area, right, rather than... but that doesn't preclude, of course, getting the overall briefing for everyone. I think in practical terms, we need to know exactly what's going on in our wards, right, so that we can at least support, help, do what we can as responsible elected members. So if that could be arranged, Derek, that would be really helpful. I'm going to move on to recommendations after that from Derek there. 2.1, we note universal credit will commence. Sorry, right, David.
Yeah, just picking up, I think Paula said that families who are in work will be better off with the universal credit system, and I'd just like to welcome the sentiment that working pays.
Fine, that's noted, thanks. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And I was just thinking, earlier this week we were waiting on a storm to hit the region and we got off quite lightly. We had our roofs down, trees down and power cuts. In a few months' time we're going to have another storm hitting this region. But this storm will be whipped up and targeted on vulnerable people by the Tories. And, in our earlier storm there was no fatalities. As a result of this storm hitting us in February, we may not be so lucky. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that's a statement rather than a question. Thanks. Okay, I'm going back to the recommendations. I'll start again. One, and this, can we get our hands up quicker, please? Because I had looked around the room and said any other questions. There was none. Note the universal credit will commence in Dumfries and Galloway for all new claimants to legacy benefits in February 2018. Okay. Happy note. Two, note the potential impacts and financial implications for our customers and for Dumfries and Galloway Council. Paragraph 3.4 in Appendix 1. Note. 3. Note the work of the Universal Credit delivered locally partnership group. Paragraph 3.9. Happy note. Thank you. 4. Agree the Universal Credit Action Plan, Appendix 3, as a base for the Council's preparations for the implementation of full service universal credit. We noted, yep, absolutely. I think we do embed in here the regular reports. I think it makes sense. So as a 2.5, that this committee, looking for your backing here, will receive regular reports throughout the implementation of universal credit and for some period afterwards, so until further notice, because we don't know how long the implications might be. And the last bit I picked up, I think it was from Councillor Davidson, and I'm happy to take it as a motion if need be, is that we should use the Council's lobbying processes, policies that are in place to lobby the Secretary of State to delay the implementation of universal credit rollout in Dumfries and Galloway. Is that a fair summing up of what you said, Rob?
That's a very fair summing up. I'm quite happy to move that if need be.
You got a seconder? Well, we've got a plethora of seconders. In the absence of any amendment, that's 2.6. Okay, 2.5 was the regular updates. Okay, so I will pen a letter which I'll share with everybody and write to the Secretary of State for Scotland because it is fully reserved to Westminster. Thanks. So with that, Paula, thank you very much for that. Did you sit? Would you want a drink of water first before you go further? Good idea. You want, Paula? You want a drink of water? You want to take some time? You're ready to go? Okay. So we're on to discretionary housing payment update. Okay. This report provides, that's item 8, provides an update on the discretionary housing payment spend during 2016-17 in order to maximise the impact of the funding allocations for this financial year, along with the anticipated increased demand for future years. The report also provides details of proposed amendments to the current policy, which had previously been agreed by the Welfare Reform Subcommittee. Okay, I am in no doubt that the changing benefit landscape, as we discussed in the previous report, means many people are at risk of severe financial difficulty and potentially face homelessness. Again, it's Paula. I will take any questions, and I'm going to open it up for members' questions at this stage. Have you got any? Jane, thank you.
Yes, I've got a question just really about the effective date for implementation of any change, should we decide to make a change, because it seems to me that we use up about £50,000 of our DHP funding reserves on an annual basis, and the proposal will up that. So I'm just curious to know why we would start to increase this right now as opposed to waiting for implementation of universal credit. So I'm just wondering about the actual timing of this.
The timing is usually that the changes take effect as soon as I walk out of committee. We are ready to implement the changes whenever we feel they are most appropriate. The expansion of support won't just support those who are in universal credit. It will help people not have arrears when they do ultimately move to universal credit by ensuring that any changes in their circumstances, the financial support is available to support them with their housing costs while they adjust. Because if someone has moved, particularly from full-time work into being unable to work due to ill health, their circumstances change quite rapidly. And changing the policy to extend the time that we are able to support them with a discretionary housing payment should hopefully mean that they have longer to adjust their finances, to deal with their unsecured loans or their contracts with mobile phones and television companies, to adjust their circumstances to their different means. Really, it's up to members to decide when they want the new policy to be implemented. We have had the current policy for a year and a half, and it is useful for customers, although there are customers who, when you look at their circumstances, they would benefit from a little bit extra time, and that's what this is about, giving a little bit extra time.
Well, simply to say it's a question of husbanding our rather slender resources, but I take the point, and I fully understand that homelessness is so much more expensive to the public purse than prevention. So yes, I understand where we're coming from.
Thank you, Chair. Just to get clarification on Appendix 2, where were these figures extracted from? Because when I look at the weekly rent at 175 per, it just seems quite excessive. And the other figures as well. Is this from a sort of national database, or is it from a Scottish database, or where has it been drawn down from?
This is an actual customer. The figures were from an actual customer's discretionary housing payment application, and the rent of £175 is a supported accommodation in Stranraer.
So it's a real live model and but anonymised.
It's a real person, but their name is not relevant.
Sorry, in that case, I'll move to recommendations. Okay. One, we'll note the Scottish Government's indicative allocation of discretionary housing payments to Dumfries and Galloway for 2017-18 is set out in paragraph 3.4. Right. 2, agree the amendments to the discretionary housing payments policy, paragraph 3.8. Right. And 3, agree the approach to the homelessness prevention fund, again set out in paragraph 3.10. Okay. Happy? Thanks very much, Paula. Okay, we move on to item 9, Town Centre Living Fund. This report asks members to consider the applications for funding from the Council's Town Centre Living Fund, which was previously agreed as part of our budget development process. We all recognise that a coherent approach to creating vibrant town centres is vital if we're going to bring about increased numbers of people living in town centres. Jim O'Neill and Jamie are here to answer any questions on the report. Just ready to open it up for questions, I think. John?
Thank you, Chairman. It was just paragraph 5.2, third bullet point down. It's the applications that are submitted for solely physical works must have the necessary planning approvals in place before being considered by members for funding. And if you go down to 5.3, it says that members agree to award any of these awards subject to conditions. The question I'm actually asking here is, should that be subject to planning?
Jim?
Yep, thanks, Chair.
it's probably the use of the word conditions that's causing a bit of confusion. At 5.3, the conditions are referring to the 4 bullet points in 5.2, so those grant conditions collectively, and one of those conditions is that planning approval is in place before a grant is awarded.
Okay, you happy with that, John?
Well, I was just going to ask, do we know that planning has been approved for the ones that are being recommended?
Yep, thanks, Chair. Planning approval is in place for the applications from the private individuals that are the subject of the report. Yes, we have verified that.
Thanks, Jim. Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just a daft question. I'm not going to object to any of the proposals being put forward, but in the Langham one, it seems to me that it's refurbishment. In fact, the paper says that, heating, kitchen, bathroom. I thought below tolerable standards funding supported that. Is this in addition to that, or is that in place of, or are we actually getting 2 applications, which brings the sum being given to the applicant to a higher amount than 7.5k?
So just to be clear, Jim, are you saying can the 2 things run side by side, or should it be one or the other? Is that the question?
No, it simply is the question. Has the applicant applied for BTS funding, because that's a kind of general given? That's the first part of the call. And I'm just curious to know whether this is in addition to that, replacing it, or whether this is the only funding this council has given to this particular applicant.
Over to you, Jim.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, we don't have a budget in place this year through the Scheme of Assistance for Below Tolerable Standard grants. So this, in fact, would be the only funding application from this individual.
Well, okay, I think that answers that question. Yeah, Ronnie?
Can I just ask a question on in 6.2? Again, it's a 95 High Street, Langham. Have the applicants made a written commitment that they will allow this property to be let for 10 years, 5 years? It doesn't seem to be clear in this paper.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to be rude and answer there. In this case, we've had a discussion with the applicant, and he is open to the property being available for an affordable rent for 5 years, as outlined in the conditions above. The other applicants have stated that they'll make the properties available for an affordable rent for 10 years, but it would be a condition of the offer to the individual concerned that he does make the property available for let at an affordable rent.
Sorry, I've got Jane next. Yep.
Thank you. I would just like to draw the committee's attention to the fact that the monies for this comes from Wigtonshire and Sederunt, who have the maximum number of second homes and therefore suffer the maximum level of, I wouldn't say blight, but I would say detriment from the issue of second homes, where they're not occupied fully throughout the year. I would like to see how this fund has been used. I see that there is £462,000 left in it, but there is no table here to show me where monies have been spent in the past, or indeed what has been applied and where in the past, how much and where. I think that's actually something quite important that we ought to get. I would like to know how this funding is made, if people are made aware of this funding. I would slightly worry that it is probably applied to particular projects that are known of, as opposed to going out and saying to everyone, because there are people in Wigtonshire, and I know that there are derelict properties in Sederunt, and these have never actually appeared. So I think it's important that we make certain that people are made aware of this throughout the region, not simply in particular areas and for particular projects. And I hope that that will come through, please, Chairman.
Thanks, Jane. You've actually preempted a question I had for the officers. Jim, have we got anything in the pipeline for anything else other than Annandale, Nestdale and Nestdale, as well, over and above Jane's question?
Yep, thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously it's an application-led process, but to pick up on Councillor Maitland's point, we have tried to increase the awareness of the fund across the region as much as possible. So, for example, the criteria for application to the fund has been distributed to all of our ward workers who have been there carrying out their work, engaging with local communities across the region. They're aware that the applications can be made, and they have agreed to support us to get as wide a coverage as possible across the region. We're also working with the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. We've made them aware of the scheme. They obviously work particularly with rural communities, and there's the potential for applications to be supported through the work that they do in very small rural communities. For example, over in Wigton, there's a potential application that may come before members in relation to the bank, or the old bank in the High Street in Wigton. We've also had discussions with property owners in Stranraer. There's a property owner at London Road in Stranraer who's considered making a bid, and also the owner of the granary in Stranraer Town Centre. We've had discussions with them also. There's information available on the Council's website, and when the opportunity arises, we try and get good press coverage as well. So we're trying to do our best to increase the reach of the scheme and try to ensure that the money is made available across the region.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Jane. Yep. Adam?
Yeah, you've stole the first half of my question about if there was any more projects in the pipeline. I think it's fair to say that while we very much, I think all members support the principles behind the Town Centre Living Fund, I just don't think we're really seeing what we fully expected at first. So I'm just wondering, in the recommendations, if they maybe need slightly changed, I think that there's agreement that we would want to reopen applications next year, but I think that first of all, a review of the criteria, and the criteria to come before this committee must take place before they're reopened.
Right, so just to make sure, absolutely sure there, Adam, what you're saying is that the recommendation with the timescales is we can live with that, get a full review, and then look at the budget setting process for next year. So effectively, the fund would close for this financial year at these dates. Is that what you're kind of saying, yeah? Is that fair comment? Nobody else? No. We'll just move the recommendations in. One, we're asked to agree an allocation of 100,760 to Cunningham Housing Association for Park Place, Lockerbie. To further agree to reinstate this project into the Council's SHIP, paragraphs 4.1 to 4.3. Agreed? Yep. 2, agree the conditions of grant, paragraph 5.2, are applied to Town Centre Living Fund applications to carry out physical works by private individuals received in this cycle, and those received before 30th November 2017. I think we need to add in there, and then that the fund for this financial year will close at this date, right? Or what's that effect? Agree the funding application for 95 High Street, Langham, is agreed at paragraph 6.2. Happy to agree. 5, agree the funding application for 103 Queensbury Street, Dumfries, 6.3. And 6, agree to allow the remaining applications to the Centre Living Fund to be considered by this committee on 5th of December. So that means we're setting a closing date of 3rd of November 2017 with a view to reopening applications in the new financial year. I think we need to add a sentence or a few words in there. Having, yes, this committee and the budget setting process having reviewed the criteria and the use of this money. Okay, are you happy to agree with that? I did, yeah.
And maybe we could have the information which I was asking about, which is what has been has been spent on in the past. Because that will...
I was just going to ask Jim, can you circulate that? Right, well, some of it could be still. It's in. Derek.
Thanks, Chairman. Just for members' information, this fund is a new fund. The report is quite clear that we're going to learn as we go along. We are very determined, as we've done, to broadcast that the only funding that's been awarded is in the minute of the last meeting, and it's in the papers today. So all funding that has been awarded is either the decisions you've just taken or the decisions you took at your last meeting, which are contained in the minute of the last meeting. So all that information is available.
And Jane.
Okay, well then we need to be absolutely clear what has been done in the past using the second homes discount monies, because that's been used in the past in a same sort of way, but not specifically for the town centre living fund. It's been used for other projects, and I think we need to be completely clear what it's been used for and what we're talking about.
Jane, that's a separate report at a different time, absolutely. Because it doesn't actually tie in with this, it's a separate thing. So that's the end. No, Jim would say we're finished, we're closed for that item.
Just information, Chair.
Well, I've got a really important announcement to make, which may be more important, but if you're quick, yeah, what is it?
Just to say it was E&I committee that dealt with that fund before through the housing subcommittee, absolutely. And that's maybe the forum Jane needs to contact for the information she's looking for.
Thanks for that clarity. And I've got a really strategic decision for us to make, because lunch has arrived and it's soup, and it will only stay so warm for so long. So the big strategic decision we're going to have to make today, guys, is do we stop for lunch now and then come back in about, well, 40 minutes? Yeah, you happy with that? Yeah. So that's, come back about, well, we'll say 1:45, yeah. That enough time for us, half an hour? Yeah, okay. So we'll call the halt just now, we'll reconvene in half an hour. That means we'll now move on to item 10. Some things are getting less and less contentious as we go through the agenda. A Gypsy Traveller Site Improvement Plan. Just to note, the Council operates 2 Gypsy Traveller sites that are in need of significant improvement in order to meet national minimum site standards. It is for this reason this report represents members with a draft improvement plan for the Council-operated Gypsy Traveller sites. Jim and Jamie are here again to answer any questions, and the members leave. We'll just go straight to questions. Any questions? In that case, then we'll go straight to the recommendations. 1, we'll agree the draft improvement plan. Happy, agreed. Thank you. 2, note the minimum site standards required to be achieved by June 2018. Happy note. 3, agree to receive a report describing the Council's approach to delivering the minimum site standards at the 5th of December 2017 meeting of this committee. Happy, agree. Great, thank you. That was easy sorted. Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, Jamie. Move on to item 11, Scottish Government Consultation, Community Empowerment Scotland Act, Part 9. Is Harry here? Sorry, no problem. This is after dinner, after lunch mode we're in. Suitably fueled and refueled and raring to go, as they say. So we're in item 11, the Part 9 of the Community Empowerment Act. Report asks members to consider extending the project plan for the production of the Dumfries and Galloway food growing strategy. It also sets out a proposed response to the Scottish Government's consultation on further guidance regarding the Community Empowerment Act. Again, Harry, take any questions. Just move straight to questions. Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. I think perhaps Derek Crichton will start to roll his eyes when it's me and allotments. There's a long story behind that, which he will remember very well from Stewardship Area Committee days. Just a question on language, effectively. I don't have any particular problem with the responses that are here, with the exception of, I'm looking at page 173 of 180, and apologies, my voice is going. It says the duty to provide allotments places an unreasonable financial burden on local authorities. I think from reports that Mr. Crichton provided to Stewardship Area Committee back in the day, that we've had that particular responsibility since the 1920s, if not before. I struggle to see why we're saying it's an unreasonable burden now, but maybe we can get that clarified. Perhaps there has been a change, which means that it now would be. I just read that and wondered what the justification was for that particular comment.
Harry?
Chair, perhaps the wording is a bit too stark. I think what we would be suggesting is that the duty to provide further allotments may place an unreasonable financial burden on local authorities, and indeed duty to improve facilities to any significant extent as well within the limited budgets that we have. So if the committee is so minded, then I can certainly adjust the wording to accommodate that train of thought.
Chairman, that adjustment would seem to be perfectly reasonable.
Thanks. Anyone else? Thanks. In that case, then I think I'm just going to go straight to recommendations. I think it makes sense. So we're asked to agree the amended project plan for the production of the Dumfries and Galloway Council Food Growing Strategy, Appendix 1. Agreed? And 2, consider and agree the proposed draft response to the Scottish Government's consultation on further guidance in respect of Community Empowerment Scotland Act, Part 9, which is the Appendix 2. Happy to agree with that? Thank you very much. I've got no other business deemed urgent and need for a decision. So moving on to item 13, which is the Local Government Scotland Act. Members are asked to adopt a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A, paragraph 4 and paragraph 9 and 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act of 1973. Are we agreed? Agreed. Yeah. Thank you.